Okay, hey everybody, we're going to give it a couple minutes to let people come in. I've set the latency lower. Just let me know if the video quality is super crappy. If it is, then we won't do that again. But I've definitely noticed that there's been a pretty long delay between the in the stream, like maybe 30 seconds even, which I think is fine for when I'm streaming Dragon Age, but for this, I think I'm going to want a little bit of faster ability to see what you guys are saying, so we'll see what this does. It looks like we're down to maybe 5 seconds of latency. Or so. Well, there's me drinking the tea, so however long that was. So today we are going to attempt to do an initial pitch deck for High Tea on the High Seas, the ridiculous game that I mentioned offhandedly in my What to Cut video. So there's a few problems with that. Normally you would not do a pitch deck from something that is actually even as well. Normally you wouldn't actually do it this way. You wouldn't start from something with even as much concept as High Tea on the High Seas. But we'll talk about that as we get to it. And we'll actually talk a little bit about why this is actually a terrible concept for a game. But we're going to try to do it in a slightly different way. We are going to this is what we're going to try to do. We're going to just work through what, why, and who, or resources, and kind of bounce between those three things over and over again, and see if we arrive at something that looks like a pitch. Along the way, I think we'll uncover some flaws in this pitch, but because we're going to work with the assumption that this is the game that we are making, then we are going to try to do a little shenanigans to patch over some of those weaknesses, either to hide them in the deck or to find excuses for why they're actually strengths, maybe. And I noticed Gabe is listening, so she's going to reach through the internet and throttle me. I think at least one point. We'll see. Maybe I won't need to make to perform any ridiculous data assassinations. So normally, I think when you were building a concept deck, which is essentially what this is. Oh, thank you. My deck is tiny. Normally when you are building let me just stop because I've forgotten already which button does which. I think I pushed the wrong button and now we push the right button. There we go. Okay. So normally when you are doing this kind of early concept, you're going to want a combination of the different kind of storytellers. Your storyteller isn't going to necessarily get you that far, but they probably started the conversation. Maybe they talked to the right executive and got you this meeting in the first place. Story crafters are really in their element when it comes to this kind of pitch, because they are the ones that are going to gather the data, hopefully listen to that data, and they are going to build the deck that is ultimately going to be the deck that you're going to present. Story shapers are useful in that process, and also useful in the process of kind of moving from storyteller to story crafter, but they're really the person that you want to be doing the presentation on the day, because they're the ones that can react to whatever's happening. So I've talked about this in my storytelling video. I'm a story shaper, not a story crafter or a storyteller. So we are going to take what is probably should be a story crafting process and try to treat it like a story shaping process, which is why we're going to bounce through this deck pretty weirdly. and we'll see how that goes. So, like I said, we're going to do what, why, and who, and kind of bounce between those and use the answers from one slide to inform another slide. And then we'll come back to those slides and sort of iterate through that and see where we get. So let's start, I think, with which is the easiest place to start for this project, which is who do we have? So let's get a few answers down and just see, well, who do we have? We have me. So, and hey, what do we know about me? Well, we know we've got, let's say, more than 20 years. Okay. We also have all of you. A growing community. Okay. We probably... Yeah. How long are we going to spend on this thing? I'm going to just arbitrarily, let's start out by saying we're going to do 1 year. I think that's probably overly optimistic, but it gives us a starting point. Okay. Money we'll come back to. Other resources we'll come back to. Gaps. So since it's just me, so going back to me, let's see, I've got some design skills, production skills, but from a gaps perspective, I have basically approximately 0 art skills. Engine, normally I think you would want to have a better understanding of what you are actually making before picking an engine, unless there's an externality that's making that decision for you. So in this case, there isn't really an externality, but I've basically decided that I'm learning Unreal, so Unreal, whoop, got caps locks on. Unreal is what it's going to be. So that's something. We've got something. We've drawn a very big fuzzy box. So given that, let's talk about what we're making. Normally here, you would probably want to talk about broad game concepts before you go into IP. Sometimes your IP is going to be predetermined. Sometimes you are going to use your game concept to decide your IP. Sometimes you're going to decide an IP and then build a game around that. So in this particular case, we are going to build high T and the high Cs, which is manners and mariners in some sort of nautical form. Is that a good idea? Well, when we get to why and we look at some Google Trends, you'll see that no, it's actually a terrible idea. But what you would want to do from an IP perspective would be to start with a few different options and run them through and see, how is it going to work. If we want to do something that is about having if we wanted to do something that's about having conversations and manners, you could do something set in the Regency period. You could do something that is set in Roman court. You could come up with some things that would fit that idea. But in this case, we're gonna jam high T on the high Cs down this thing's throat, and this is where we are going to try to make the data fit the reality. Okay, so let me just describe what we're making. Okay, so we are making. Okay, so we are making some sort of manners and sailing, something to that effect. Okay, so now we get to why. This is where you're really getting into the actual pitching process, where you're potentially going to be talking to someone and saying, this is why you should make this. So in this case, because of what we're actually making, there are actually some why reasons beyond simply because it'll sell a lot of copies. Because it won't sell a lot of copies. So we can use this as Unreal training. I think because of the nature of what we're probably going to end up with, we're going to get, we can stand up a dialogue system. And also just sort of general. It's been a long time since I made a game on my own. So game dev, learning, distribution. So really the big reasons why are we making any of this stuff is to give me an opportunity to go through the process in a more independent way and show you things as we go along. I don't know how to put a game on Steam, so let's figure out how to do that. But if you're pitching this to a studio, I just put some loose tea in my mouth. If we're pitching this to a potential studio, we're really going to want to talk about what our potential markets are. And this is where you start to see some of the problems of that come out of this. So if we look at pirates as a trend, I actually have a better one here. What you can see here, if I compare Pirate to Battlefield, what you can see is Pirates for the last 5 years has been trending down. Something I wanted to check is if I literally go as far back as it'll go. Yeah, so I think there's maybe a story to be told here about Pirates are a brand that can be strengthened. I assume the early 2010s was the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, and they haven't made one in a while, so interest is waning. So if I am going to pitch this as an IP, I think this is actually probably the most interesting potential story. Let me see if I can figure out how to use this thing. Whoops. Okay, not that way, apparently. What? Oh my gosh. So you can tell I've used the snipping mode a ton. New. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to literally just pull this out and put a new slide right here. So even though this is not the most compelling bit of data, which is, Pirates got kind of big, but they've been declining ever since. There's something there, and you can see that, Battlefield, the brand that anchors one of the biggest shooter franchises on the planet, is able to cause Battlefield to spike in interest every 12 months or so. So there's potential in the brand. It's definitely in decline, but yeah, that was the first Pirates of the Caribbean. I think they basically built Pirates of the Caribbean from here to here. In fact, why don't we even go so far as to make, probably you would want to, well, that's a lovely, normally I wouldn't recommend that you actually have someone, watch someone build a PowerPoint deck, but yeah, I'll do that, and then that is potentially a story that can be told. That's the period where Disney was really pushing on Johnny Depp, the weirdo, doing. So there's definitely something there. Maybe some other things that I think are useful. are these two polls I ran, which are, should I do more content? Should I do more high seas content? So the biggest, 93% of people on Twitter said more content like this, please. 96% on YouTube said more high seas content, but there's one problem with both of these. There are only 43 votes on the Twitter poll and only 93 votes on Twitter, or on YouTube. So, this is where we get slightly fraudulent, and we just maybe do a little like this. Look how much more compelling that poll just became. Oops. And so, you need to have it was Twitter. All of Twitter said this. So what's going to happen you're not lying here exactly. I mean, it's a lie of omission. But you definitely don't want to, if asked, and you might get a smarty pants in your pitch that is going to say, wait, how many people actually, the color doesn't match. Well, that's fine. It's fine for now. How many people actually answered this poll? Yeah, see, Gabe's mad at me. So look at that. So we've gone from something that is like, okay, yes, less than 100 people said anything that was useful, to some indeterminate number. Are you going to think to ask? In fact, let's go ahead and do that. And then we don't even need this one. And that. There. All right. So this gives us something where it's like, yeah, there's interest in this. When asked, people are interested in it, despite the current state of pirates as a brand. One thing I'll just say in the sort of, I'm not going to use, what? No, Gabe, you've taught me everything I know. So one thing I'll say in the ninjas versus pirates battle, you can see that at the moment at least, ninjas kick the crap out of pirates. Probably because there's a streamer. Let's just see if we go back far enough. Yeah, it's been a fairer fight in the past. But for the last 5 years or so, ninjas have definitely beat pirates. Okay, one last one. Tea versus coffee. I don't know if this is useful or not, because, coffee's beating tea very consistently, and I'm not entirely sure. Oh, yeah, there's just incomplete data. No one has searched coffee or tea in the last 5 days for some reason. I'm not sure if there's interest there. Maybe there's something. I'm going to just clip it because I think that potentially this might be a one that you need to have in your appendix, because what you might get is a question of why tea, why not coffee? Tea is so much less popular than coffee, and you can say, well, actually, you're not completely wrong, but they're at least in comparison to each other. So I would maybe put this in the appendix potential. So appendix. Okay. So we've done one round, or we've done one pass around, And now what we're going to do is we're going to literally just so that this is a more of a living document. Normally you wouldn't do what I'm about to do. And we're just going to do that, paste it in place. And okay, so given what we've... Yeah, that's actually... I believe T does have a greater global significance, but if you believe Google Trends at all, this is worldwide. If I pull it down to just the US, you'll notice that it's more significant gap there, except for apparently South Dakota. They're into their T. But yes, I think probably what's happening with the oh yeah, it's probably the top. I think what's probably happening with T is that you're getting searches for T as opposed to searches for all the various T words. Because, you know, you've got cha and the various other, well, though it's interestingly from a diverge perspective, there are basically only two root words for T, cha and T. And you see basically how T got to a place based on whether or not their T word sounds like cha or their T word sounds like T. But probably don't put that in the deck. Okay. So now we do this. We've done our Y, and now we're going to go back around and we're going to say, okay, so what are we going to do? What do we need to, now that we've done one pass through, what more do we need to know? Well, I think that we need to address this, this gap here. So I think we are going to say, I'm just going to give myself a art outsource budget. I don't know how much. That not a lot has changed here, other than that. Yeah, there you go. See, everyone discusses their T words in the comments. Given that we are focused on this Y about dialogue system, general game learning, distribution, so I think that the best place to start from a what perspective is to start on things that address those particular goals. So I think the best place to start is start with conversation. And see where we get, because that's going to give us the best learning perspective. It's going to stand up a dialogue system, which would be useful to have and use for other things. It restricts our art assets quite dramatically because we can potentially get away with a single set, like a cabin or something to that effect, and it really narrows what we're doing. So we're going to start with a conversation, and then we'll see about sailing later. So what does this conversation look like? Well, so I think that conversation. Yeah, so we probably need a relatively standard form of conversation. But that's not really gameplay, or it's not gameplay that stands on its own. So I see a couple of potentials that don't dramatically feature bloat the game. So there could be, you could have something that is sort of a like a keep the conversation going, where you are picking topics. Like, you know, like weather and the like, to try to keep your conversation going with the other person for as long as you can. The other option that I've thought of is sort of an observational system. So you have, would be essentially a standard conversation, but with sort of almost a hidden object gameplay on top of it. That's potentially kind of difficult from a scalability perspective because you're having to build these little puzzles for each of your conversations, but it's probably more interesting from a gameplay perspective. You're talking to a person, you're having this conversation, and you're trying to keep the conversation going, but at the meantime, you're also looking and like noticing that there's claw marks on their shoulder, and you're like, oh, you can ask about the claw marks. Oh, what's with the claw marks on your shoulder? Oh no, my parrot flew away. Oh, you must be really sad about your parrot, and like let you use your observational skills to keep the conversation going. I think there may be something there. Again, I think that we're starting from the perspective, the assumption that the conversation is the core of the game. And I think that's a reasonable place to start, given our whys, because our why is mainly driven by let's learn Unreal better, let's stand up some things that we could use in the future to make another game. Given that at the moment I don't have any plans to make a swashbuckling sailing game, putting a lot of effort into sailing at the moment is probably misdirection. Conversations is probably, given my background, something that would be useful no matter what game that I am making. So it's probably a good place to start. So we've refined, we've tightened a little bit. Let's go back to why. So future. So segmentation, let's think about that. It's like probably this is core YouTube fans, and let's start potential markets. Whoops, no. So we talked about why we're making it potential markets. So. I think in this case is just that's the phone ringing. Existing fans, potentially tea enthusiasts. So let's say audience. I'm not going to be spell checking myself as we go, and we got Pirates of the Caribbean hyperfans. From a segmentation perspective, I think we are really talking about people that are into storytelling and characters more than action. So we've got our whys. So now let's go back through one more time. Before we do that, I'm just going to thank my members. There are a few on the stream right now, so thank you. If you are interested in becoming a member, I think during the stream there's a $ or a money sign somewhere on the page to the right. You can get there from there. Thank you for that, because that supports the channel. But we're not going to linger too long on these slides, and we'll just keep going. And we're going to go back around one more time. So I think given that we are going to jump to what and talk about what are next steps. So next steps probably are stand up a conversation. And I imagine that to do that, we're going to start with a So single stage. Maybe it's a cabin, and then neat. I don't even know how I did that. Always fun watching people type. Yes, that's, you know what? Thank you for that, MPG. I will actually put that down. Interesting story. When I was working on, when I was still on handhelds, we did try to figure out a pitch for a Harlequin game. Harlequins, at least at the time, I haven't really been following the marketplace since the mid 2000s, were huge. Like, they were the biggest selling things by a lot. And for those, sorry for all the English lit people, I'm going to say is just that Jane Austen is most definitely the precursor to the Harlequin. The reason we didn't actually end up pitching anything is actually relatively simple, because at the time there wasn't much crossover between the Harlequin audience and the video game playing audience. So the question basically came down to the question basically came down to, okay, you've made an awesome Harlequin game. It's really compelling, and it really scratches all the itches that makes a person buy a Harlequin. How do you convince the main buying audience of the Harlequin, who don't play games for the most part, that this is a thing that they should try? Where do you even talk to them? They don't buy gaming magazines. Where do you put your ad? And that ultimately, we never really had a good answer to that. Now, interesting, today in 2022, or, the world's longest 2020, that is actually a little bit easier, because gaming has broadened a lot in the last 15 years, and now you can imagine that you would advertise it in Bejeweled, or in Matchington Mansion, or in all of the various other games that are played by people who don't consider themselves gamers, but are actually gamers. Because the reality is that the gaming audience is ginormous, and it's become a lot easier to talk to segments of that audience that 15 years ago was basically virtually impossible to talk to. So, talking to Jane Austen enthusiasts today is actually a lot more possible than it was back in 2006 or whenever, when we were looking at doing a Harlequin game. Okay. So I'm just going to do this. Nope. I don't trust my ability to draw with the mouse. So if you imagine, next, probably we want some sort of, you know what, that's actually not the worst color in the world for this. Nope. Nope. This one. Yeah, okay. So if we basically imagine that we're literally going to make ourselves a cabin. So we're going to have, oops, everyone watching me fumble around here. So we're going to have, a porthole here. Hey kids, don't use PowerPoint as your main graphics software. And then insert something like and we go like person. So pretty simple, right? Like, I mean, if you're just mainly doing a conversation, you imagine that you've got person, and then you probably want something like one of those, oops. One of those things. Let me do this. Make that lovely silver. And you know, stacked up with snacks. And then we need a teapot. Oh, I'm not going to try to draw a teapot. But we probably need, you know, it's fairly simple, right? Like, you can start to see that you're going to have the space sort of starts to define itself. You got that, and oops. It's oh, I guess you know one thing. Okay, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but you can start to see, like, this is actually not a bad place to spend some next steps. Is build this thing for real with a real single person. So it's like one person to talk to, one stage. I'm going to just do something awful from a formatting perspective, but one stage, you know, some snacks and tray, teacup plus saucer, teapot. So that gets us something, right? That gets us something that looks like something, and then you can actually do a conversation system. And then we can start to prototype the manners, we'll call it that. Oh, I keep turning my caps locks on. Why? Okay. So that's an interesting place to start. I mean, this is, if you had this, if you build this, and you've got something where you can talk to a person, they can interact with the items. You've got more than many games ship with from the perspective of a conversation system. Yeah, I mean, this to the question in the chat about should you be prototyping this in something other than Unreal? Yeah, probably. probably you should absolutely, because I keep saying, some sort of manners gameplay or some sort of keep the conversation going gameplay. That's something, because it's going to live largely within the conversational logic, you could probably do something even in Twine. I'm not gonna, but that would probably make more sense, because this game is likely going to live or die from if it's fun or not from the perspective of that. But we're not gonna, because we're going to lean really heavily into this. I think going through this a couple of times, it's really about that. It's about the Unreal training. It's about getting a dialogue system stood up. It's nice and tight. That will. Hey, Gabe. It's nice and tight, and it gives us a nice starting point to build upon. If you were doing this for real, and this was really, we are doing this for real, I guess. If you were really trying to focus on, this is where we are going to be spending our money, and this is the kind of game that we are going to use in order to try to push conversations forward and reshape the landscape of video game conversations, I would definitely recommend starting with actually probably a paper prototype around how your conversation is going to work, and try a few things out. I will probably do a bit of a paper prototype, but I'm not going to stand anything up in anything like Twine or even Unity, because we're leaning into Unreal as our primary goal. That we are going to definitely try to focus there. So we've got, it's, what are we, 40 minutes in, and we haven't really got a pitch yet. What we're really getting here is more of a concept, which is good, because you kind of should have a concept before you're getting into your pitch. So let's go through again and see if we can start to... The pitch is going to largely live or die on the what and the why. The who is largely supporting. So let's start cleaning this up a little bit as we go. And we're going to say, okay, we're going to start and build something for real. So we've got team. Great. So now this is where the let's say creative language was going to increase a little bit, because we're actually starting to think, what if this was actually a pitch? So we're going to say greater than 20 years. Find which of course is just me, but so what here, look, it's a picture of me. Okay. Oh, that's a stupid picture of me, but that's fine. Boink. Okay, and we're going to actually start oh, what in the world? That is super weird. Okay, the drop shadow apparently does not animate in with the animation, so we'll have to clean that up later. Okay, and then we are going to So if you were actually going to pitch this, you would not start with the who. You would start with the what. And in fact, you would probably do your whys first as well. So, whoops, what did I just do? Oh, okay, I moved the wrong slide. Okay, so time frame, we're going to say that we are going to try for 12 months from start. I still think that's kind of optimistic, but then we have, and I think we need to, and then we have a growing YouTube community for support. Okay, and then 12 months. And then we will say, we'll get rid of gaps, because when you're pitching, you're not going to talk about your gaps. And we will say, I'm going to, did I turn my caps locks on again? No, we're good. We are going to say, we're going to give myself a $1,000 art outsource budget. Will I actually spend that? I don't know, I'm pretty cheap. And so we can get rid of this. Why is there a little, doesn't matter. Okay. Okay, so that's actually starting to look like something that you would actually pitch, other than the weird drop shadow thing. Except, okay. But going back to what? So what are we making? We are making, I'm going to actually duplicate this slide. Okay, we are going to make, let's see if I can get my pitch on. It's been a while. So we're going to explore the edges of conversational I think that's actually good. Core. And then so they have a standard conversation system, lighting, and hopefully this is interesting, watching me do this. I know this won't be one of the most my most watched live streams, certainly, but hopefully people are getting something out of it. And the idea will be that we'll probably shut it down before we're done, and then I will actually try to make an actual pitch out of this ridiculous thing. So, which is why I'm wordsmithing a little bit as we go. We are not going to worry about either of these things for now. Okay. There's something there. I don't know what it is yet. So, keep so this is about okay, and gameplay integrated with okay, I think it is worth keeping this slide. Okay, so actually, let's do this. Okay, sorry, I do love my morph. Okay, so what do we have? Is what we have. Okay, so we need another slide here because we haven't actually said what in the world we're making. We're making high T on the high seas. It is about manners and conversational fencing on a pirate. Say pirate like that. Ship. We are going, so it is about the romanticism. That is an interesting choice of spelling. Wait, did I? Oh no, I didn't. There we go. Of the cinematic pirate, as well as the. Let's do it this way. The cultural of a high tea conversation with the peerage. So that's it. That's the game, right? I mean, it is going to be focused. So, let me see what we got here. We got. So that is what we're making. It is focusing on the conversational aspects to and exploring new opportunities for conversational gameplay. So that's the high level pitch. That's what it is. Conversations core, doing that. Yeah, there's something there. I'll see if I can, and then roughly that we don't need. Then what? So then what are we doing next? We're building this thing. And why this particular thing? Mainly Unreal training, but also I think we've actually come to yeah, so we got general dev learning. We're going to do this and this over here. Okay, so and got this. Okay. Okay, I think we also want to probably we're going to want to talk about exploration of new storytelling gameplay through a low risk project. There you go. Doesn't hurt to tell people that you're definitely going to be low risk. Distribution. Okay, so then I think we actually probably want to just talk a little bit back here about what is this thing. Okay, so it is, we're going to start as PC primary. So this is really, whoops. We're really talking here about platform, about the nuts and bolts. So PC primary, probably Steam. I don't know why I all capsed it, but that's fine. We are going to probably though want mouse plus keyboard and controller input. And then price point, let's say, let's not get too crazy, $5 price point, and we'll try for about 2 hours of gameplay. Scope. Okay, so let's back up here and see, what do we got? We've got high T and the high C's. It's matters in conversational fencing on a pirate ship. Pirate, the romanticism of the cinematic pirate. Let me just say, not the reality. No one's getting scurvy. But also the culture of a high T conversation with the peerage, focusing on the conversational aspects, exploring new opportunities for conversational gameplay. So it's starting to feel like something. Conversation is the core of the game, so building a standard conversation system with lighting, object interactions, and then explore the edges of conversation through let's say conversation twice. Let's say gameplay, new gameplay approaches, so keeping the spark alive, which is keeping the conversation going as long as you can by choosing choosing topics and observing your opponent. We probably need a term for the person you were talking to when it's driven through gameplay. It's not simply the other person. And then looking for new topics. So this would be like hidden object or some sort of search during conversation. So that sounds like something that is interesting and adds to the standard conversation. Okay, so PC primary, because while this is probably makes more sense on other platforms, where that's going to just simplify our starting point. Mouse and keyboard plus controller, aim at $5, see what we hit, and $5 probably means, yeah, I like guessed, thank you. I think I'll keep it in quotes, however. Okay. Next steps, we are going to build this thing with, actually, let's do this. Build a conversation. Okay, and then so that's what we're doing next. We're going to make this actually, yeah, definitely mobile would be on the radar, but we'll start with PC just because for simplicity's sake. So why are we doing this? First and foremost, it is about Unreal training and standing up a dialogue system. It's also giving us an opportunity to explore new storytelling opportunities. So the keeping the conversation going is something I could imagine in a standard RPG, as is the sort of looking around and seeing hints or clues within the conversation as it's going on. So I do think there is benefit in that kind of exploration. Also, just general, how do you get things onto Steam? How do you make a game work? So who are we selling this to? Well, existing fans, potentially, people that are really into tea or really into Pirates of the Caribbean. If we can really nail that manners aspect, then yeah, it starts to tap into people that are fans of period drama or other forms of that kind of high class conversational media. And then ultimately, this is about really getting storytelling and characters as a starting point. So that one of the core audiences for the Bioware game are people that are really into characters. If we can make the person you were talking to an interesting character, then that is compelling, regardless of what other things are working. The probably least baked part of this entire deck is this bit about the math parts. Yeah, the Downton crowd is exactly right. In fact, why am I even? Just say it. Downton Abbey's getting a second movie, so. Okay, so this part is I need to do a little bit more exploration to see if there's an argument to be made here that pirates are an IP or a brand or a topic that is cyclical, and that cycle is about to repeat. That would be the argument that I would make here. Yep, that's the argument. So, it's been a while. Disney is due to restart part of the Kirby. Is that true? Don't know. True enough. Okay, we asked, should we work on this? The resounding answer was yes. Don't squint too hard and realize that I am hiding how few people actually responded to this, but 90% is. So here's the actual argument for this. Even if the curtain gets pulled back, of people that you got to respond, we have a greater than 90% positive reaction. So while the net promoter might not be huge, because you have a very potentially incredibly large neutral audience, you have a relatively you have a strong positive push. There aren't a lot of detractors. You have a lot of neutral. So that's the argument that says basically that, even if this isn't going to sell hugely well, it's probably not going to cause any damage. And then tea versus coffee, this probably belongs in the appendix, as I mentioned. It just says, coffee is, as a search term, is weaker than tea, but it is not as much weaker as you might imagine. Added that in, it would be getting really close. Why did that? Okay. And then to wrap us up, so what are we? So how are we making? How are we making this? Well, we've got a team that has greater than 20 years of combined gameplay experience. With me as a lead, and a growing YouTube community to serve for beta testing and other purposes. And we're going to set a time frame of 12 months from start to finish and give ourselves about $1,000 of outsourcing budget for art outsource. So, you know what? That's not a pitch I would take to a publisher, but it's something that is starting to build something. The truth of the matter is you're not going to pitch at this phase likely anyway without some form of gameplay or some really compelling concept art at the very least. There's not a lot to go into the meeting with. You're going to want, ideally, that conversation stood up in order to show, like, look, this is interesting and compelling. Now you want to give us some money. Right now, the best you could hope for is to find an angel investor who's willing to give you some money in order to take it a little bit further. But they're basically betting on the team as opposed to betting on the concept at this point. There's not enough here to really understand what is or isn't possible with this concept going forward, but it's enough to get started. It's enough to move towards the next step, and then as you get something stood up, you can kind of go through the same process again and start narrowing down and building towards something that is actually going to be compelling to a publisher or an external investor or your mom. So that's really the next step. I'm going to refine this and tighten it down, and see if there is an actual 2-minute pitch in here, and if so, I will make a video on that. I won't make everyone sit through me wordsmithing the life out of this thing, and Gabe's watched me play fast and loose with the math or the interpretation of the math enough, probably for one day. I hope people found this interesting. If you did, give the video a thumbs up, because that will potentially spread it to other people. I don't know how this will do, but I think we'll probably call it there. That was an interesting exercise, and went about as well as I expected it to. So I hope that people got something useful out of that. If you have any questions beyond what we talked about in the stream itself, put them in the comments of this video. I will try to get to them. Sometimes YouTube locks comments on live streams behind a filter. It's not so bad. I didn't find anything that I could really spin. It's actually pretty dark. It's pretty grim. Pirates. I think pirates are the. I'm gonna have to have a think about how I spin pirates, the data on pirates, to make it not look like it is completely collapsing in upon itself. I do think that Disney's due to reboot that franchise is probably the best I'm going to be able to come up with. We'll see where we get to in terms of the community actually helping out directly. I think once we stand something up, then we might have a more real conversation about something there. Definitely, I think that there are some interesting opportunities. So thank you for spending the last hour and 15 minutes of me doing this. I hope it was entertaining. I will see you again soon. Goodbye.